Hi there, Sandra here from the Schwowin's Nest. Thanks for joining me today. This mirror unit I found at a thrift store for $8. It's pretty heavy with the mirror in it, so I have decided to remove the mirror and just use the frame itself. The first thing I'm going to do is remove these screws that are holding the mirror in place, and I'm also going to remove the hangers and the paper backing. The mirror comes out really easily, and I'm just going to set that aside. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it. Here's what it looks like on the back. I'm going to clean up a little bit more of the paper and get it prepped for painting. The previous owner had put in these cup hooks and also another hook on the side. These are in really super tight, so I had to use my needle nose pliers to get them started so I could remove them. When I get wood items from a thrift store, and pretty much any item, I like to use disinfectant wipes to clean off all the surface. It gets all the dirt off, any of the grime. Then I let it dry for a few minutes and it'll be ready to go. I'm going to use this crack shot spackle just to fill in the holes from the cup hooks and those two little screw holes in the corner. I'm going to use Rust-Oleum chalked paint in linen white and just a regular dollar store brush, nothing fancy. I don't mind getting some brush strokes because I will be distressing this at the end, and I'm going to make sure I get into all of those cracks and crevices. This project needed 2 coats. I love the look of the linen white, but I need to do some distressing. No farmhouse project would be complete without it. I'm using Folk Art chalk paint in the color Maui Sand, which is a beautiful charcoal gray color. And I'm going to use this rough brush and just flick the brush across the edges. And that's just going to accentuate all of those ridges and those little corners and grooves, and it's going to look absolutely gorgeous. I'm also going to go around the outside edge of the window frame and make sure I do some on the bottom shelf too. While I'm distressing this, I wanted to share with you that this video is part of a collab that I am hosting with 4 other YouTube friends. We love to do thrifting and flip our thrifts and make something old into something new. So I'd really appreciate it when you're done watching my video if you'd go down to my description box, click on that playlist link, and check out what Vesna over at Vesna TV is doing, Jamie at Simple Roots Simple Living, Pat from Pat's Home Craft, and Cindy, that crafting lady. The last thing to do is add some hangers so the person who gets this in their home can hang it on the wall properly. I like to use these self-leveling sawtooth hangers. They're called sawtooth hangers because of the ridges, and they're self-leveling because there's lots of space for you to adjust your nail. I always need to hold my tiny little nail to attach these in my needle nose pliers because my fat fingers won't hang on to anything properly. But it just helps me get that nail started, and I do that on both sides. This was a super easy project, and I really love how it turned out. The second project I have for you today is a table that came from Bombay. I know this because it had a tag on the bottom of it, and it stands really tall with these really tall legs, and I didn't like that. So I'm going to be marking off 4 inches on each of the legs, and I'm going to be cutting that down. I was fortunate enough to figure out that all of the legs came off. They just unscrewed very easily. So I was able to take these 4 legs out to my table saw in the garage and cut them down. Now that everything's all reassembled, I'm going to start painting it with Rust-Oleum chalked paint in the color charcoal. I started off just using a regular dollar store brush before remembering that I have a beautiful Bennett chalk paint brush that I love to use on furniture because it just gives such a nice smooth finish. So in a moment here, you're going to see me switch out my brush. So this is the Bennett chalk paintbrush that I love to use. It's a small one, it's round, and it just does an amazing job putting the paint on really nice and smooth. You can load up the brush and it just goes such a long way. They're beautiful brushes. I believe they might only be available in Canada, but if I can find a link on Amazon, I'll put it down in my description box. So I have flipped the table over and you can see the beautiful burgundy color again. It's so pretty. I just don't like burgundy at all, and it has quite a bit of a scratch in it on the top. Now, this piece cost me all of $9 at the thrift store, so there was no way I was going to pass it up. The reason I'm painting it with the charcoal first is because of the burgundy stain. I don't want any of that red coming through at all. Even though it's got a top coat, I'm not taking any chances that it's going to bleed through. This is the reason why I painted it gray first, is because I want to paint it white, and I didn't want to take any chances of that red coming through and turning my white pink. I've had that experience before, so I always make sure that I prime or use a different color underneath first. Gray is always the best color to block out any of the red, at least that's my experience. I'm also using the same chalk paint brush because it's just going to go on so much more smoother. And I'm using Folk Art White Adirondack paint. I had masked off the top part of the table because that's going to stay dark gray as my base. So now I'm just removing the painter's tape to show some nice clean lines of the white next to the gray. And if I did miss anything, I'll just touch it up with a tiny little brush. Now I'm going to be adding some more texture and dimension with some other folk art paints. The light gray is Parisian gray, and the other color is rich black. I'm starting off with the Parisian gray, and I've moved back to just a really cheap rough brush. This is a dollar store brush, and I'm doing my dry brushing technique, which is taking a little bit of paint onto my brush, dabbing it off, and then going ever so lightly on top of my project to get some nice texture. I'm going to be layering this with a couple of different colors, and I want to make sure that I don't go too heavy to start because I'm not quite sure of the look that I'm going for just yet. At first, I'm going across the project this way, and I'll probably change directions as well. You can see some of the brush strokes coming through from the chalk paint brush, but that's okay. I really love that different type of texture. It makes it look more rustic and authentic like wood. Now I'm using some of the black and I'm just going to darken up some of the edges and give it a little bit more texture. I'm going very lightly to start and then I'll probably layer a little bit more afterwards. These two knobs were on the front of the table, so I'm using some of my hammered metal finish spray paint in black, and I'm just going to give these a nice couple of coats of spray paint. Once they're dry, I'm just adding them back on. They did come in two little pieces, so one is almost like a little flat washer, and then the top part screws right in. It makes it look like it has some artificial drawers. The last thing to do is to seal my project. I'm using Minwax water-based polyacrylic. It's in a clear matte finish. And one thing that I can recommend is make sure that your project is really nice and dry and almost fully cured. I like to wait a day or two before I put a top coat on. If you don't, you run the risk of some of the chalk paint pulling up and getting onto your brush. And especially when you've got some texture like I do here, you don't want that to happen. I am totally in love with this piece and I was originally going to sell it, but I have decided to keep it. I'd like to thank Vesna, Pat, Jamie, and Cindy for joining me in this collab. If you liked what you saw, I'd love for you to stick around a while. Hit that subscribe button. Those two black arrows will show you exactly where to click. Thank you so much for watching my video today. Hope to see you soon in the next one. Bye for now.